Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Daniel Umstead, host of the RNG Radio Show. I'm really excited. I got another guest that came back on the show, Karla Hill. If you want to know the bio, learn more about her, but you will be able to get in contact with her today as she's going to share with me an amazing update. But for further info about what she does, check out episode 231 of the RNG Radio Show. But without further ado, Karla, how have you been? What have you been up to? And we're going to talk about this 5-minute assessment that you had me taking. But tell me some updates. What's been going on since the last had you on the radio show?
So lots of updates. I retired from my position, not from my work. My 35-year career with government as an HR executive. I retired in September of 2024. And as I said, you know, people in this society, they don't get used to the word retirement. They see you sitting back just doing that. But I believe I have a greater mission, so to speak, in terms of the economic empowerment of others through career planning, business development, and asset building. But I am so grateful for the time that I had in government as an HR executive, because if you really think about it, in government, there's not any occupation that you could name that does not exist in government. You know, you have your police, you have your fire, you have your scientists, you have your tradespeople, you have your mechanics, you have your technologists. And for me, who's a career planning geek, I love occupations intrinsically. I don't know why, but God knew that. And I've had the opportunity to support all of those occupations. So in terms of running my career planning practice full time now, pivoting towards my work and thinking about the quote that your passion is your life's purpose, seeking outward expression. I believe the higher power, the universe, who I call God, does not waste. So my experiences is that 35 years in HR as, you know, the oldest sibling, 4 brothers, a mother, all of those things have come together at such a time as this, right? Along with certifications. So again, that's part of your design, but if you're not growing, you're declining, right? So lots of updates over the past 3 years. I've released 92 pounds, and I say release as opposed to lose, because when you lose, you go try to find it, and I'm not trying to find it, right? So it's gone, it's released. So we
call that abandonment in law. You have relinquished all rights to the 92 pounds.
Exactly. So no flour, no sugar. And, you know, ironically, I talk about assessments all the time, certified in Myers-Briggs, Career Direct, and this. And one of the things and I've taken so many, because I just think it's important for you to understand yourself and we're our greatest asset. And one of my number one personality traits is that I'm unstructured. And on reflection of my journey of weight release and general personal development and maximizing who I am, the missing piece was structure, right? Because I'm not intrinsically that way. And God in his infinite wisdom has surrounded me with, in terms of staff, and even my husband is more structured. My mom is more structured, and I'm more of a visionary, like, oh, we're going to build a plane, fly it. And he surrounded me with people that have helped. But when you have to actually put the oxygen mask over yourself, in terms of my weight and my practice, I needed that structure. So now I lean in looking for structure in areas of faith, right? Fitness, continuing that, in family, fun, and finance. I just, like I said, I didn't think that way before, but now it's as one of my roles was training director. And when we come up with, like 20 years ago, when we come up with training plans, it's not focused on your strengths, it's focused on the gaps. Right? So I have to be very intentional, because it is not as much fun as being strategic and talking to people. So what are the developmental areas? And I've leaned in on that, and now even embraced it and desire it. Like the first step of Think and Grow Rich, I desire structure now. And ironically, when leaning into that, I have even more freedom. So it's really ironic. Right. So that's my update.
I appreciate it so much, and I wrote down a few things, that I definitely want to go back to. You talked about not so much not grow. If you're not growing, uh, you're pretty much going and you're losing.
You're
You're going
dying, you're dying.
time. It's decaying away, and this assessment, because we're going to get into it. This assessment that you sent to me, which is only going to take 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. So get in contact with Karla. You're going to get her contact information. Take the assessment. But the assessment helped me as far as that direction. I know my pathway is after law school, becoming an employment attorney, but it's like, hey, you still have that position. I'm still trying to figure out as far as what areas of employment law I want to look at, but what position are you going to be in? Are you going to be that researcher? Are you going to be that director? How are you evolving, and growing? So I think it's key that folks realize that, when they're doing this assessment and even when they're doing their own reflection piece. So that way they're not, it's like, oh, losing weight, it's like, oh, I failed today. It's like, well, what's your gap? What are you missing? Is it the fact that you're seeing a donut shop on the way to your work? Do you need to find a different route so you're not seeing the donut shop? You're not being tempted, later on. I got a friend of mine who was talking about Taco Bell, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can we not talk about Taco Bell because it's going in the wrong direction for me? So, and you brought up that structure, of course, family and the love of your life, your husband being surrounded by that, but people need to gravitate towards that, especially if they're looking for that growth. So, thank you for breaking that down. Let's talk about this assessment. What should people know about the assessment? And before getting into it, how can they get in contact with you so they can get started on the assessment? And then we'll hop
Oh,
into it.
that's great. Yeah. So the quickest ways to get in touch with me, I'm going to give my number as well as my website. So my telephone number is 215-802-0050. Again, 215-802-0050. And another way is Karla Hill with a K, Karla, KarlaHill.com. You can get in touch with me that way as well. So your preference. And in terms of one more update that I'm
Yes.
very excited about. So assessments, we're going to talk about the one that you took very quickly because a lot of people get scared off by in-depth assessments. It just depends on what's going on. But I recently became certified to deliver assessments for 12 to 16-year-old students. And why I'm so excited, even though my practice has been with adults 16 and over, high school students, so on and so forth. But what I've seen over my career, Daniel, is that the earlier someone knows their purpose in terms of their personality, interests, skills, values, priorities, the better. I compare it to the concept of compound interest. If someone understands the principle of compound interest when they're 40 and they implement, they'll be okay in terms of retirement. But imagine when someone's 12 and they're like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, they will be wealthy. And it's the same thing with career exploration. Because you see it very early that someone has gifts. I mean, and I'm not a biblical scholar, but one of the scriptures in Proverbs talks about train up a child the way he should go. And it says, and we know that that's scripture, but if you really could apply it to other areas too, the way he should go, not the way you should go, right? Your son could, it's not about, okay, Daniel's dream is to be a lawyer. Your son may or may not want to be a lawyer, but our thing is looking at the gifts that your son may have and guiding him along that path in terms of his personality, interests, skills, and values. So this gives data earlier, right? Where most of us, being that HR executive that is terminated tons of people, laid people off, they're not bad people. They're not operating in their design. If I think of how most people end up in their jobs, it's just by happenstance a lot of times, right? There is really no planning. It's, and there's a term called identity foreclosure, where if you have just a set of occupations that are before you and you don't intentionally explore, you will foreclose. You just say, oh, I'm a tall woman, maybe I should be a model. And there's nothing, you could be, a scientist, it doesn't, but since we haven't had that exposure, we're not intentional about it, you just end up wherever. So it's really about being intentional, and the tribe, so to speak, the village that are raising our children, our students, people mean well. But it's just like if you went to a doctor, Daniel, and they say, oh, all men your age have this going on. Just take this, the doctor said. But they, in the interim, they didn't ask you they didn't do any intake. They didn't have any blood results, blood or vital signs, or your vital signs, or your family history. What are they basing that diagnosis on? What are they basing that recommendation on? So it's the same thing for charting out your career. So assessments, that's the benefit of assessments.
Yeah, and you talked about that fear portion of it. The only thing, ladies and gentlemen, that you can be afraid of is not doing it. You get to a point in life where it's like, oh man, I could have did this, maybe 10, 12 years ago. The old proverb is, planting a tree. It's like, hey, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So if you're starting that seed with the assessment and even being able to pass it down, if you have that luxury, and I consider a luxury, even though sometimes I want to choke up my teenage son, but if you have that luxury, of having that child in your life, or even being that influence on your niece and nephew and showing them like, hey, this is the building steps that you could be doing now. They're doing it, for the other ethnicities of the world, if you will, by generationally teaching them, like, hey, these are the steps to pathway for generational wealth. These are the steps to pathway towards financial freedom. Or, if you want to become a doctor, lawyer, this is what you need to do and prep for. But not everybody has that access, if you will, but they do have access to you, Karla. And that is
Yes.
with the telephone number that you provided. So run through it with me. They text you, Karla. They said, hey, I listened to both episodes on the RNG radio show of yourself. I'm interested in learning about this assessment. You send them the assessment link. They take it. What's next for them?
So then we schedule a quick discovery call to really break down the results. And even in the interim, you get a preliminary report, complimentary, that basically breaks down and it's almost the tools in my toolbox. So the assessment that you took, Daniel, shows why I like that one is it's quick and it really determines what your passion is and how you go about doing that. It was developed about 18 years ago. And it was originally developed for consumer behavior, consumer buying habits, why someone buys and how they go about deciding to make that decision. So that's like underneath. Now, some of the other traditional tools are more like a PET scan. It's more detailed of, right, your personality and what are you naturally interested in and all those other skills. Because yes, you're on your way to be an attorney now, but you've had other life experiences that we want to incorporate in developing that path. So many of us, people like to put people in nice little boxes, right? They might see somebody working at Walmart and they may not, and I've seen this a lot. I'm a daughter of an immigrant. And because when people come over here from other countries, they have different credentialing. So like when I was in one of my departments, we had several people that were doctors in their countries, but they come here and they have to take a lower level clinical or science type of position. So but they could be brilliant, but because you see them in this support role or something, you don't know. But part of my job is pulling all of that out because people segment their lives. We want to get all of the data and really knit that together, create that synergy where you could be operating in your genius zone. Quite honestly, the threats and all the things that people are hearing and their concerns about their job, being at HR tables, leadership tables, the missions of the organizations isn't to make sure you stay employed, right? And for profit, it is to ensure that they are earning profits for their shareholders. For nonprofits and government, is to provide it as efficiently as possible, right? So the role, your job, is to bring your skills to the marketplace and earn as much as possible for you, or where you can have a sustaining wage for you and your family, or build wealth if that's what you're looking for. But you have to understand what, like a SWOT analysis in business. If I learned one thing in business in my undergraduate program, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we use it for entities, for organizations. We need to use it for us, right? So what are Daniel's strengths? What are Daniel's weaknesses? What are the opportunities in terms of where you're going? And what are the threats, quite honestly, right? So, but that's the way we need to do. We know more about our phones, and we know more about our cars and everything else. The Eagles, we can, or any of the football teams. I grew up I grew up in New York, so I was a big New York. So I knew about sports, and I knew everything. But we need to know more about ourselves. Right. So, and we need to take that seriously. The strategic advantage is, once you know all those things about yourself, what's my genius zone? What's going to make me a superstar where I can demand the things that are coming to me? I think, quite honestly, Daniel, the enemy is mediocrity. People think they can really do anything, but you could do it in a mediocre way.
Yeah.
But I want people it's a win-win. If people are operating at their top based on what their design is, as well as the organization wins, if you're doing it for your business is going to win, and you feel more fulfilled. I've seen it. Like I said, on the other side, when people are operating of the HR, when they're operating in their gifts and their talents, when you make a great hire, it's like, well, maybe I'm kind of nerdy, but it's like art to me, right? It's just wonderful. The organization's happy, they're happy, and we could just move on, right? So, but it's a lot of gaps where people are not satisfied, and they wonder why, right? That they're not being retained, right? So, but if you bring your genius zone, you increase your chances of being retained. And quite honestly, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there's about 33,000 different types of occupations. When you talked about what type of law, I had a client recently who's an attorney. He is an attorney and went to the top schools, but he still wasn't satisfied. And part of it was because one thing we talk about in assessment circles, if you stay within, you'll never go without. And that basically means know who you are and leverage your strengths, identify your weaknesses. But instead of saying, I want what that person is, that person's a successful lawyer, but they might be sitting at their desk 60 hours a week, right? That's maybe not what Daniel wants. Now, what we came up with that strategy for the person, and this is almost supernatural. There was a opening, because he worked for government also, and there was an opening in the innovation unit of that department, where innovation, a lot of people think just technology, but technology is just the tool. You need the operations person or people to work with you to come up with the innovation of the solutions that are needed for the mission. So at that time, an opening came up where he can transition, and he liked representing his clients, but they needed him in that technology unit. They didn't just need a technologist. They needed someone that understood the operation so they can really identify the needs, the processes, and then come up with the appropriate tools and innovation to improve the services. So people don't know that there's so many different types of things, and that doesn't mean he has to stay there either. But for this time, that was a natural shift to leverage his law degree, his knowledge of the operation, but his desire to do something different at that time.
And it goes back to what you had said, seeking that high potential. I had mentioned earlier, wanting to be that lawyer when I was first starting out, many moons ago. This was around AOL days, if anybody wants to backdate it. But during that time frame, while in college, it was like, I want to be the pencil pusher. I want to just be the corporate lawyer sitting in the back. But had time passed and I did that pathway, I probably would have been miserable and not using my potential. Probably wouldn't even thought of even doing this amazing podcast, RNG radio show. Yes, that's a subliminal message. But you're missing out, on the joys of life, of your own life. And I want to get to a question as well. We talked about the SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Some folks, and I'm going to be semi-optimistic, if you will, some folks will say like, oh yeah, I know my strengths and I know what opportunities are when I combine those strengths. For those that are stuck on their weaknesses or even so much threats, if a company is going through a SWOT analysis, they can hire this person, shift this organization, and maybe delegate it to this department to handle maybe such threats or even weaknesses. When it's a person by themselves and they're stuck on those threats as far as what to do or even weaknesses, how do you pretty much best guide them as far as how to attack those and check those off and turning them into strengths and opportunities?
So one of the things, I'm also a certified career coach, right? Sometimes it takes time because it is mindset. There's some deprogramming that quite honestly has to take place. I have a client right now that is an HR executive, and she is so talented and she's very creative. So one of the things that she's going to be doing is transitioning because she realizes the talents, but that took a while, right? In terms of, because part of what this country really does, and people, and we all mean well, is that we want that illusion of safety. So, but that comes with also, but she's putting her finances in place, right? Also, to make sure that she can have those right transitions. Now, I had a person that was a parent, an entrepreneur, that wanted her adult son and daughters to really make sure that they're flowing in their gifts and talents. And one was like a struggling, aspiring medical student. She always knew she wanted to be a doctor. Now, the blockage was she didn't like traditional medicine. If I, and that was coaching also, like 8 weeks, where it, everything lined up, the right schools and the MCATs, but it was like a block that I really don't want to do that. I want to be in that holistic medicine. But our messages come from traditional medicine. Long story short, she is now enrolled in that alternative medicine situation because that's what she wants to do. And that's what she's done in terms of working in chiropractic offices, acupuncture, everything shows her, in terms of HR, behavioral based interviewing. Tell me about a time that you've done this. Everything pointed to that health, that overall health, and not medication, right? So that's what she wanted to pour out, but it was really fighting against everybody else saying, oh, you're going to be this type of doctor, you're going to be that. So she had to like take that. And what her parents wanted was really for her to be optimized, to do what you want to do. We will pour into you. So she had the support as well, right? And she is just going to another level in terms of that program. So again, we have to, it's not just knowing, oh, I know it's this, we're not robots. We have lots of internal programming, societal pressures, trauma that we have to overcome in order to move to where we need to move to.
I love that. And the blessings are there with that support. For the ones who, and I say who classify themselves because I even classify myself as an introvert, but you wouldn't notice. I'm a very lovable and fun kind of guy. You see me in public, I will be your best friend and brother to you. But please, if I could, put me in a corner, hot chocolate robe. I'm watching cartoons all day. But for the introverts out there who, are afraid to maybe reach out for that support, even though it's there, or maybe even just go out and connect, how can they pretty much find that potential within themselves if they're afraid even just to even love on themselves, to take that step to get out there?
I love that question. One of my activities over the years, been Toastmasters, because I'm more of an introvert as well. And our transportation agency in Philadelphia, SEPTA, I was part of their Toastmasters club because the governmental entity had a rental office in that building, and I would go there during lunchtime. And what I noticed was a lot of the engineers were in Toastmasters because that was a safe place for them to practice. We know traditionally engineers tend to be more insulated, more introverted. Give me my, but they know that in order to move to that next level, typically in government or para government type of organizations, you're going to have to be able to supervise people and communicate. So that was a way, that was their practice field, right? So where it was a safe place, it's tough to practice at work because people are seeing you. But imagine so what I'm saying are, there's clubs, there's other things that you might like to do, there's church, wherever your other volunteer activities, or if that's your intention, then you're coming up with a training plan where you could practice in a safe place. That's an excellent example, because there is help. And I come up with the resources to help people. Once we have to identify, like you said, the weaknesses or the developmental areas. And then we also make the decision on whether, all right, I know I have a weakness there and I don't really need it because that's not what I want to do. But yes, I do have a weakness there, and I'm going to have to develop a plan to mitigate it, to maximize. We have a choice, right? Just like we were in a company. Okay, these are the weaknesses. That's fine to have that weakness. Let's say somebody that says, okay, I'm not trying to supervise people. I'm fine with being an introvert. I'm good, right? But there might be something else. Hey, I want to remember the movie Moneyball. I'm aging myself. Moneyball was a movie about the Oakland A's and their winning World Series.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that nerd came up with a way to revolutionize. So he brought his technical nerdy skills to sports. So that person that has those introverted skills, whether it's technology or math, or we can come up with a system like that. So what industry would really fuel you? Because a general skill set like HR or communications, technology, finance, you can work in any industry. Every industry needs that. Right? So I'm not saying every introvert has to change to an extrovert. We have to understand what your goals are, right? So that's why it really requires a customized way of feeding what you want to do, not what society says. Oh, everybody doesn't have to be extroverted, because then who's going to listen, right? If everybody's talking, we need introverts to listen.
Cooks in the kitchen at that point in time.
Exactly.
Like, somebody got to eat. So somebody got to cook something. We can't just keep talking about here what's the best dish. Somebody got to cook something. So yeah,
exactly. I mean, and not everybody's made to be an entrepreneur. And when I say you need to be able to identify your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, some people and the 30-page more detailed assessments talk about what do you really like to do, and the thing is, if that's what you like to do and you're in a cubicle, we need employees to do that. And that's perfectly fine. We want you to do you. We're not trying to make you say, oh, be that super. It's not that. Just like in sports, there's utility players, right? They could play every position. There's superstars that only play one. The most recent Heisman Trophy winner, which is an anomaly that he's very strong in defense and offense. So, but that's his gift. Does that mean everybody's like some people say, focus on one thing? It just really depends. So that's why it's really, you can't just really skip over things, right? It just gets you in that area so we can keep growing, right? And optimize. It's really that career optimization that I want for people.
I love that. Thank you so much, Karla. I got two other items that I want to talk about. But before we get to that, yes, Subliminally, need your contact info one more time. If you could drop that for the ladies and gentlemen listening right now.
Yes, you have two ways to contact me. You can go to my website, karlahill.com with a K, KarlaHill.com, or you can reach me directly at 215 802-0050.
Much, Carla. And my last two items. One, if you can give a motto or piece of advice for those listening. And then two, any last items that you want to go over before we wrap up.
So one, I mentioned it earlier, one of my favorite quotes is your passion is your life's purpose seeking outward expression, right? So meaning that how do you know your purpose? How do you know what you want to express if you don't really even ask the question? We just really kind of muddle through life. I see it all the time. So pausing to reflect on who you are, we are a summary of our experiences, our design, where we're like a patchwork, combining all those things. And I don't want any of that to be wasted. So let's fully leverage. God doesn't make mistakes, right? There's a reason that you're listening to this podcast. There's a reason that you had jobs that you hated. There's a reason that you had activities that you loved. So let's just be more intentional about bringing that together to come up with a plan together to move to that next level. And one thing I want to talk to you about in terms of what you came up with in terms of that preliminary assessment, director executive. So it's called the drive assessment. D is for director, motivated by lifestyle, living a life by design and freedom. That's the Y. R is for relators. Relators are interested. I'm a relator, interested in mentoring, interested in optimizing people and giving back. The I's for intellectuals. They like the systems. They will go down the rabbit holes. If it doesn't make sense, they need to get more data for it to make sense. The V are for validators, people that really like that external type of pat on the back, but they're great at giving validation. They're the 3 a.m. friends. If you're in trouble at 3 a.m., that's who you want to call because they're going to come and get you because they love the trust. And then executives. Executives are motivated by goals. Both are secondaries. You're a director executive. I am a relator executive. So you are motivated by making sure that you have that freedom, and that creativity also, Daniel. So being the typical attorney, that's just that corporate attorney running through and looking at things, you could do some of that, but you want to make a difference also. You want that creativity. You want that input. That's why you're in law school and you're also doing podcasts that create, and that's all you're probably doing lots of other creative things that other people don't do, right? So feeding that, maximizing that. But how you do that, you have goals. You knew you were going to go to law school. It may not be in somebody else's time, but you knew you were going to go. Executives are motivated to accomplish goals, to have metrics. Oh, I've done this and that, not as much structure, but problem solving, right? So in terms of having that base, you're willing to do all the work and have that work ethic, but to get to goals and that creativity in terms of accomplishing goals, that innovation, just like I said I think that the lawyer that I talked about, his was a director. I said, that's why he loved that innovation unit, because they're looking at solving problems. They're not looking at doing things the same way, right? So keep that in mind. Our thing is leveraging your superpowers and leaning into your genius zone and things that you do naturally well in terms of you probably accomplish goals very well.
Thank you, Karla. Y'all just got a taste as far as just everything that's been racking my brain, and Karla just simplified it for me. So thank you so much, Karla. I appreciate having you on the RNG Radio Show. Always welcome to come back. And for my listeners out there, if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to the RNG Radio Show by going to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even iHeartRadio. Karla, thank you again so much. Really appreciate and value you so much for being on the show. Let's continue to stay in touch.
Love it. Thanks for the opportunity, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the RNG Radio Show. Be sure to like and subscribe for more episodes and future content. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at danielumstead.com. Stay blessed, my fellow millionaires.